Staff Sergeant Elena Vasquez had been declared killed in action in Afghanistan for 10 years when she walked through the doors of Fort McKenzie headquarters, very much alive, carrying evidence that would expose the biggest military cover-up in decades. But before that moment, that would shake the entire Department of Defense to its core. Elena had been the kind of soldier that commanders dreamed of having in their units. At 28 years old, she possessed the rare combination of tactical brilliance, unwavering integrity, and genuine care for the soldiers under her command that made her stand out in the 3rd Special Operations Battalion, preparing and narrating. This type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. Elena never sought the spotlight, preferring to let her actions speak louder than any words ever could, while other non-commissioned officers filled the barracks with stories of their exploits and competed for recognition. She quietly reviewed mission briefs, double-checked equipment manifests, and ensured every member of her squad was prepared for whatever challenges they might face in the field. Her service record read like a textbook example of military excellence, but those who served alongside her knew that the commendations and efficiency ratings only told part of the story. Growing up in East Los Angeles as the daughter of a single mother who worked 3 jobs to keep food on the table, Elena had learned early that actions mattered more than promises. When she enlisted at 18, she brought that same work ethic to everything she did in the Army. During basic training at Fort Benning, her drill sergeants initially mistook her quiet demeanor for weakness, but they quickly discovered that Elena Vasquez was made of something different than most recruits. She excelled in marksmanship, consistently scoring expert ratings that caught the attention of special operations recruiters. Her performance in urban warfare simulations was flawless. But what truly set her apart was how she helped struggling soldiers improve their own skills without ever making them feel inadequate. Elena possessed the rare gift of teaching through encouragement rather than intimidation, building up her fellow soldiers while maintaining the highest standards. Corporal Mike Thompson, a young soldier from Ohio who had joined Elena's squad fresh from advanced individual training, later described her leadership style as transformative. She never raised her voice, never berated anyone for making mistakes, but somehow managed to inspire soldiers to exceed their own expectations. Elena would spend her own free time working with soldiers who struggled with weapons maintenance, patiently explaining procedures until they mastered every detail. She organized additional training sessions for squad members who wanted to improve their tactical skills, turning what could have been tedious extra duty into collaborative learning experiences. Master Sergeant David Rodriguez, who had served with Elena for 3 years before the Afghanistan deployment, often said that she had an almost supernatural ability to read situations and people. During training exercises, she could identify potential problems before they developed into serious issues. Elena would quietly adjust squad formations, suggest alternative approaches to mission objectives, or recommend personnel changes that invariably improved overall unit effectiveness. Her recommendations were always presented respectfully, never challenging authority, but always focused on mission success and soldier safety. Elena's reputation for integrity was equally impressive. During a training rotation at the National Training Center in California, she discovered that another squad leader had been falsifying maintenance records to avoid additional duties. Rather than looking the other way or handling the matter informally, Elena reported the violations through proper channels, while simultaneously working to help the struggling leader improve his procedures. Her approach resulted in corrective action that strengthened the unit rather than destroying the soldier's career. Her fellow soldiers respected her not just for her competence, but for her genuine concern for their welfare. Elena made it her business to know about her soldiers' families, their personal challenges, and their career goals. She wrote letters of recommendation that helped soldiers advance their military education, connected them with resources for family problems, and even used her own leave time to attend important events like weddings and graduations. Specialist Sarah Chun, who served under Elena for 2 years, kept a letter Elena had written supporting her application for officer candidate school, calling it the most meaningful recognition she had ever received. Elena's technical expertise was matched by her tactical innovation. During a complex training scenario that simulated a hostage rescue operation, she developed a communications protocol that improved coordination between different units while maintaining operational security. The technique was so effective that it was adopted throughout the battalion and eventually incorporated into standard operating procedures. Elena received a commendation for her contribution, but she was more proud of the fact that the technique had been successfully used in real operations to save lives. What made Elena truly exceptional was her ability to maintain the highest professional standards while never forgetting the human element of military service. She understood that behind every uniform was a person with hopes, fears, and responsibilities that extended far beyond their military duties. This understanding made her soldiers more effective because they knew their leader genuinely cared about their success and survival. Lieutenant Colonel Patricia Stone, Elena's battalion commander, had identified her as having exceptional potential for advancement. Elena's personnel file contained recommendations for promotion to sergeant, first class, and eventual selection for the Sergeant Major Academy. Colonel Stone had personally mentored Elena, recognizing in her the kind of leadership the Army needed to develop for future challenges. Elena's personal life reflected the same dedication and integrity that defined her military service. She sent money home to help her mother, who had never remarried, and continued working to support Elena's younger brother through college. Elena's letters home were filled not with complaints about military life, but with stories about the soldiers she served with, and her pride in being part of something larger than herself. This was the soldier who would deploy to Afghanistan in 2013, carrying with her the respect of her peers, the confidence of her superiors, and the unwavering moral compass that had guided every decision of her military career. The 3rd Special Operations Battalion operated from Forward Operating Base Phoenix, a strategically positioned installation in Afghanistan's Kandahar province that served as the nerve center for counter-terrorism operations throughout the volatile region. Established in 2011 during the height of coalition forces' presence in Afghanistan, FOB Phoenix was more than just another military outpost. It was a critical hub where intelligence gathering, special reconnaissance, and direct action missions converged to disrupt terrorist networks that threatened both Afghan civilians and international security. The base housed approximately 800 personnel, including special operations forces, intelligence analysts, drone operators, medical teams, and support staff who worked around the clock to maintain operational readiness in one of the world's most dangerous environments. Every person stationed at Phoenix understood that their work directly impacted the safety of coalition forces throughout Afghanistan and the security of citizens back home who depended on their success in dismantling terrorist organizations. Elena's squad was part of Alpha Company, a specialized unit trained in high-value target capture, reconnaissance missions, and emergency response operations. The company operated under the command of Captain James Harrison, a West Point graduate with multiple combat deployments who had earned his soldiers' respect through competent leadership and genuine concern for their welfare. Captain Harrison ran his company according to strict protocols, designed to maximize mission success while minimizing casualties, understanding that in special operations, attention to detail could mean the difference between life and death. Operational structure at FOB Phoenix was built on layers of redundancy and verification that had been developed through years of hard-learned lessons from the battlefield. Every mission began with comprehensive intelligence briefings that drew from multiple sources including satellite reconnaissance, human intelligence assets, signals intercepts, and pattern analysis. Mission planning involved extensive collaboration between operations officers, intelligence specialists, and the soldiers who would execute the plans on the ground. Elena's role as squad leader meant she was responsible for translating complex mission objectives into actionable tactics that would keep her soldiers alive while accomplishing their assigned tasks. She participated in mission planning sessions, where every detail was scrutinized, from approach routes and extraction procedures to contingency plans for various scenarios that might develop during operations. The planning process typically took days for each mission, with multiple rehearsals and equipment checks ensuring that every soldier understood their responsibilities and could adapt to changing circumstances. The stakes of their operations extended far beyond military objectives. Afghanistan in 2013 remained a complex battlefield, where terrorist organizations continued plotting attacks against civilian targets worldwide. Intelligence indicated that several high-value targets in their area of operations were involved in planning attacks on European and American cities, making their capture or elimination critical to preventing mass casualties among innocent civilians. Elena's squad had successfully completed 17 missions during their deployment, capturing 6 high-value targets and gathering intelligence that led to the disruption of multiple terrorist cells. Their success rate was exceptional, but Elena never allowed her soldiers to become complacent. She constantly emphasized that their next mission was always their most important one, because the consequences of failure could ripple across continents. The trust relationships that bound the unit together were forged through shared danger and mutual dependence. Sergeant Tommy Martinez, Elena's most experienced soldier, had served with her through 2 previous deployments and could anticipate her tactical decisions with uncanny accuracy. Corporal Lisa Wong, a communications specialist, had developed such proficiency with Elena's operational preferences that she could establish secure communications networks that perfectly supported the squad's mission requirements. The command structure at Fort Phoenix emphasized accountability at every level. Lieutenant Colonel Robert Hayes, the battalion commander, maintained personal knowledge of every ongoing operation and required detailed after-action reports that captured lessons learned for future missions. Colonel Hayes had built his reputation on protecting his soldiers through superior preparation and intelligence, never sending anyone into the field without comprehensive mission analysis and robust support procedures. The medical facilities at Phoenix represented another critical component of the system that kept soldiers alive and operational. The base hospital was staffed with trauma surgeons, emergency medicine specialists, and a full range of support personnel who could handle everything from routine injuries to complex battlefield trauma. Medevac helicopters stationed at the base could reach any location in their operational area within 30 minutes, providing a lifeline that allowed soldiers to take calculated risks in pursuit of mission objectives. Intelligence operations at Phoenix operated continuously, with analysts working in shifts to monitor communications intercepts, satellite imagery, and reports from human assets throughout the region. The Intelligence Fusion Center brought together information from multiple sources to create comprehensive pictures of terrorist activities, enabling mission planners to identify opportunities and threats with remarkable precision. Elena's squad relied on this intelligence infrastructure to plan their operations, but they also contributed to it by gathering information during their missions that helped other units and supported broader strategic objectives. Every patrol report, every piece of equipment captured, every detail observed during operations was fed back into the intelligence system to improve understanding of enemy capabilities and intentions. The broader context of their deployment was the gradual transition of security responsibilities from coalition forces to Afghan military and police units. Elena's squad often worked alongside Afghan Special Forces soldiers, providing training and support while building relationships that would continue after coalition forces departed. These partnerships required cultural sensitivity and professional respect that Elena had developed through careful study and genuine appreciation for her Afghan counterparts. Knowledge of local conditions. This was the environment where every decision mattered, where protocols existed for good reasons, and where Elena Vasquez would soon face challenges that would test not only her tactical skills, but her fundamental beliefs about honor, duty, and the obligation to protect those who served alongside her. Major William Krueger arrived at Forward Operating Base Phoenix in September 2013 with an impressive service record, sterling recommendations from his previous assignments, and a carefully cultivated reputation as an aggressive leader who got results regardless of obstacles. At 42 years old, Krueger possessed the kind of commanding presence that immediately commanded attention in any room, standing 6 feet 3 inches tall with the bearing of an officer who had spent 2 decades climbing the military hierarchy. Through calculated ambition and strategic positioning, Krueger's assignment as the new operations officer for the 3rd Special Operations Battalion came with explicit instructions from higher headquarters to increase mission tempo and maximize capture rates of high-value targets in preparation for the upcoming drawdown of coalition forces. Pentagon officials wanted impressive statistics to demonstrate the effectiveness of special operations units, and Krueger had been specifically selected for his track record of delivering the aggressive results that looked good in congressional briefings and media reports. What the official records didn't reveal was that Krueger's previous successes had often come at the expense of soldier safety and operational integrity. During his assignment in Iraq, Krueger had developed a reputation among subordinates for prioritizing mission statistics over proper planning and risk assessment. He had pushed for operations that other officers considered too dangerous, manipulated intelligence reports to justify questionable missions, and taken credit for successes while distancing himself from failures that resulted from his poor judgment. Staff. Sergeant Elena Vasquez represented everything that made Krueger uncomfortable about the modern military. Her quiet competence and genuine respect from her soldiers contrasted sharply with his leadership style that relied on rank and intimidation to achieve compliance. Elena's reputation for thorough preparation and careful attention to soldier welfare conflicted with Krueger's philosophy that special operations required accepting higher risks to achieve dramatic results. During his first week at FOB Phoenix, Krueger observed Elena's squad conducting post-mission debriefings and was immediately irritated by what he perceived as excessive caution in their operational approach. Elena's methodical analysis of mission variables and her insistence on comprehensive contingency planning struck Krueger as the kind of overthinking that prevented units from achieving their full potential. He viewed her soldiers' obvious respect for her leadership as a challenge to the aggressive command style he preferred to maintain. Krueger's background included connections to defense contractors who had been pushing for expanded use of private military companies in Afghanistan operations. These companies offered higher profit margins than traditional military operations and provided opportunities for retired officers to secure lucrative consulting positions. Krueger had been quietly exploring how to position himself for post-military career opportunities, while simultaneously advancing his military rank through impressive operational results. The major strategic thinking focused on creating operational statistics that would demonstrate his effectiveness as a leader while building relationships with contractor representatives who visited FOB Phoenix regularly. These contractors promoted operational concepts that emphasized speed and aggression over the careful planning procedures that Elena and other experienced squad leaders had developed through hard experience in previous deployments. Elena's approach to mission planning represented a direct obstacle to Krueger's ambitions. Her insistence on thorough intelligence analysis, comprehensive risk assessment, and detailed contingency planning extended mission preparation timelines beyond what Krueger considered acceptable. He viewed her methodical approach as evidence of excessive caution that prevented the battalion from achieving the aggressive mission. Tempo that would enhance his reputation with higher headquarters. During operational planning meetings, Krueger began challenging Elena's recommendations with increasing frequency. He questioned her tactical assessments, suggested that her risk analyses were overly conservative, and implied that her preparation requirements were slowing down operations unnecessarily. These challenges were presented as professional disagreements about tactical approaches, but experienced officers recognized them as personal attacks on Elena's competence and judgment. Krueger's criticism extended beyond tactical matters to Elena's leadership philosophy. He openly questioned whether her concern for soldier welfare was appropriate in a special operations environment, suggesting that her protective approach to leadership was incompatible with the aggressive mindset required for successful counter-terrorism operations. These comments were made in meetings with other officers, creating an atmosphere where Elena's methods were portrayed as potentially hindering unit effectiveness. The Major's agenda became clearer when he began promoting operational concepts that prioritized rapid mission execution over comprehensive planning. He advocated for compressed planning cycles that would allow the battalion to conduct more missions per month, arguing that increased operational tempo would keep terrorist organizations off balance and demonstrate American resolve during the drawdown period. Krueger's proposals included reducing intelligence analysis time, streamlining mission approval processes, and accepting higher risk levels in exchange for increased operational frequency. He presented these concepts as innovative approaches to special operations that would position the battalion as a model for other units throughout Afghanistan. Elena recognized that Krueger's proposed changes would compromise soldier safety and mission effectiveness, but his position as operations officer gave him significant influence over battalion procedures. His recommendations carried weight with Colonel Hayes, who was under pressure from higher headquarters to demonstrate measurable results during his command tenure. The philosophical conflict between Elena's experience-based caution and Krueger's ambition-driven aggression created tension that affected the entire battalion. Soldiers began to sense that mission planning was becoming politicized, with decisions influenced by factors beyond tactical effectiveness and soldier safety. Krueger's true character would soon be revealed through actions that prioritized his personal advancement over the lives of the soldiers he was supposed to protect, setting in motion events that would ultimately declare Elena Vasquez killed in action while serving the corrupt interests that valued statistics over integrity. The first warning sign came during a routine mission briefing 3 weeks after Krueger's arrival at Fort Phoenix. Elena's squad had been assigned to conduct surveillance on a suspected weapons cache in a village 15 kilometers north of the base. A straightforward reconnaissance mission that required careful positioning and extended observation to gather actionable intelligence without alerting enemy forces to coalition interest in the location. Elena had spent 2 days analyzing satellite imagery, studying intelligence reports from previous operations in the area, and coordinating with local Afghan forces who possessed valuable knowledge about civilian movement patterns around the target village. Her preparation included detailed contingency plans for extraction routes, emergency medical evacuation procedures, and communication protocols that would maintain operational security while ensuring rapid response if the situation deteriorated. Major Krueger stood at the front of the briefing room, his uniform immaculate but his expression carrying the cold calculation of an officer who viewed soldiers as tools to advance his personal agenda rather than human beings whose lives depended on competent leadership. The assembled squad leaders and support personnel had no idea they were about to witness the beginning of a systematic campaign that would ultimately cost lives and compromise mission effectiveness. Mission planning procedures are being revised. Effective immediately, Krueger announced, his voice carrying the authority of someone who enjoyed wielding power over others. All reconnaissance operations will now require approval timelines, reduced to 8 hours maximum preparation. Extended analysis periods have been identified as inefficient use of resources that prevent this battalion from achieving optimal operational tempo. Elena raised her hand respectfully, her voice professional despite the growing concern she felt about the implications of compressed planning timelines. Sir, 8 hours doesn't provide sufficient time for proper intelligence analysis and contingency planning. Current procedures exist because they've proven effective in protecting soldiers while ensuring mission success. Krueger's response was immediate and calculated to establish dominance while undermining Elena's credibility in front of her peers. Staff Sergeant Vasquez, your excessive caution has been noted by higher headquarters as potentially detrimental to unit effectiveness. The enemy doesn't wait for us to complete perfect plans, and neither should we delay operations for unnecessary overanalysis. The room fell silent except for the hum of air conditioning and the distant sound of helicopters conducting training flights. Every officer present understood military protocol well enough to recognize that Krueger's public dismissal of Elena's concerns violated professional norms, while revealing personal animosity that had no place in operational planning. Elena maintained her composure despite the public humiliation, but she noticed the uncomfortable glances exchanged between other squad leaders, who had worked with her long enough to understand that her careful preparation had consistently resulted in successful missions with minimal casualties. Captain Harrison shifted uneasily in his chair, recognizing that Krueger's criticism contradicted his own observations of Elena's exceptional performance over multiple deployments. Krueger's new requirements made no tactical sense and served no operational purpose beyond asserting his authority over procedures that had been developed through years of combat experience. The compressed timelines would force squad leaders to skip critical preparation steps, rely on incomplete intelligence analysis, and accept unnecessary risks that experienced soldiers knew could be avoided through proper planning. After the briefing, Sergeant Martinez approached Elena quietly in the corridor outside the operations center. "Ma'am, that was completely out of line. Everyone knows your planning methods have kept soldiers alive and missions successful. Krueger's timeline requirements are going to get people hurt." Elena appreciated Martinez's support, but she maintained her professional response despite her growing concerns about Krueger's motivations. "We follow orders, Sergeant. Our job is to make the new procedures work while maintaining our standards for soldier safety and mission effectiveness." That night, alone in her quarters, Elena reviewed intelligence reports and tried to understand how she could maintain proper mission preparation within Krueger's artificially compressed timelines. She had spent 5 years developing procedures that balanced thorough preparation with operational requirements, and she knew that Krueger's changes would force dangerous shortcuts that compromise both soldier safety and mission effectiveness. Elena's conversation with Captain Harrison the following morning revealed the broader context of pressure that Krueger was placing on the entire command structure. Harrison explained that the major had been questioning the competence of multiple squad leaders, suggesting that their careful preparation methods reflected insufficient aggressiveness for special operations environments. "Elena, I want you to know that your performance has been exceptional throughout this deployment," Harrison said carefully. "But Krueger has direct communication with Colonel Hayes about operational efficiency, and he's painting a picture of excessive caution that supposedly prevents us from achieving our full potential." The implications were clear. Krueger was building a case against Elena and other experienced leaders, whose proven methods conflicted with his agenda for aggressive operations that would enhance his reputation with higher headquarters. His criticism wasn't based on performance evaluations or mission outcomes, but on ideological disagreements about how special operations should be conducted. Elena realized that her commitment to thorough preparation and soldier safety had made her a target for an officer whose priorities focused on personal advancement rather than unit effectiveness. Krueger's public dismissal of her concerns represented the opening move in what would become a systematic campaign to eliminate opposition to his dangerous operational concepts. The warning signs were unmistakable to anyone who understood military, politics, and personal ambition. Krueger had identified Elena as an obstacle to his plans and was beginning the process of undermining her credibility while positioning himself as the innovative leader who could unlock the battalion's supposedly unrealized potential. Krueger's campaign against Elena escalated dramatically over the following month, transforming from public criticism into a systematic effort to destroy her reputation through carefully orchestrated accusations and manufactured evidence. The Major understood that directly attacking a decorated soldier with Elena's service record required subtlety and patience, so he began building a case through whispered conversations, selective documentation, and strategic manipulation of mission. Reports. The first fabricated incident occurred during a routine patrol that Elena's squad conducted near the village of Coast-Matin. Elena had successfully navigated her team through a complex urban environment, gathered valuable intelligence about insurgent movement patterns, and returned to base without incident after a 12-hour operation. Her after-action report documented several tactical adjustments she had made in response to changing conditions, demonstrating the adaptive leadership that had made her squad consistently successful. Krueger twisted Elena's tactical flexibility into evidence of indiscipline and poor planning. In his summary report to Colonel Hayes, he characterized Elena's adaptive responses as failure to follow established procedures and unauthorized deviation from approved mission parameters. The Major's report made no mention of the valuable intelligence Elena's squad had gathered or the successful completion of their assigned objectives. Staff Sergeant Vasquez continues to demonstrate concerning independence in tactical decision-making. Krueger wrote in Elena's personnel file, "Her tendency to modify mission parameters without authorization suggests potential reliability issues that require monitoring." The language was carefully chosen to create doubt about Elena's judgment while avoiding specific accusations that could be easily disproven. Krueger's next step involved pressuring Elena's fellow squad leaders to provide statements supporting his narrative of her supposed deficiencies. He conducted individual meetings with Sergeant First Class Robert Chun, Staff Sergeant Michelle Torres, and other experienced leaders, presenting his concerns about Elena's methods while subtly encouraging them to reconsider their positive opinions of her leadership. "I'm hearing reports that Vasquez may be taking unnecessary risks with her soldiers," Krueger told Chun during a private conversation in his office. "As experienced leaders, we need to look out for each other and identify potential problems before they result in casualties. Have you noticed anything about her decision-making that might concern you?" Chun's response was immediate and unequivocal. "Sir, Staff Sergeant Vasquez is the most competent squad leader I've served with. Her preparation methods and tactical judgment have consistently resulted in successful missions with zero casualties. I've never observed anything that would raise concerns about her leadership." Krueger's expression darkened at Chun's refusal to provide ammunition for his campaign against Elena. "Sergeant Chun, loyalty to fellow soldiers is admirable, but professional responsibility requires honest assessment of potential problems. Perhaps you haven't been in position to observe some of the concerning patterns that have come to my attention." The Major's implied threat was clear. Chun's own career could be impacted if he failed to support Krueger's narrative about Elena's supposed deficiencies. Similar conversations with other squad leaders revealed the systematic nature of Krueger's effort to isolate Elena from her professional support network. Krueger's third escalation involved manipulating mission assignments to create situations where Elena's careful preparation methods could be portrayed as obstacles to operational effectiveness. He began assigning her squad to missions with artificially compressed timelines, then criticizing her request for additional preparation time as evidence of excessive caution that hindered battalion operations when Elena requested a 24-hour delay for a high-risk target capture mission to allow proper coordination with supporting units. Krueger documented her request as resistance to operational directives and failure to maintain aggressive posture required for special operations. His report to Colonel Hayes suggested that Elena's caution was preventing the battalion from achieving optimal mission tempo. The major's most damaging fabrication involved Elena's relationship with her soldiers. He began spreading rumors that her protective leadership style reflected favoritism and unprofessional relationships that compromised unit discipline. Krueger suggested to other officers that Elena's genuine concern for soldier welfare was actually weakness that prevented her from making hard decisions required in combat environments. Effective leaders maintain professional distance, Krueger told Captain Harrison during a routine meeting. Vasquez's emotional attachment to her soldiers may be preventing her from utilizing them effectively in high-risk operations. Her squad's success rate could improve significantly with more aggressive leadership. Harrison's response reflected his growing discomfort with Krueger's attacks on Elena's proven methods. Major Vasquez's leadership style has resulted in exceptional mission success with minimal casualties. Her soldiers' respect for her translates directly into enhanced unit effectiveness. Krueger's campaign expanded to include Elena's training methods and professional development activities. He criticized her voluntary mentoring of junior soldiers as inappropriate use of duty time and suggested that her efforts to improve unit cohesion were actually creating cliques that undermined military discipline. The major began requiring Elena to submit detailed justifications for routine decisions that other squad leaders made without oversight. Her equipment requests required additional approval layers. Her training schedules needed supplementary documentation, and her mission reports underwent scrutiny that bordered on harassment. Elena found herself spending increasing amounts of time responding to Krueger's administrative requirements rather than focusing on mission preparation and soldier development. The bureaucratic burden was clearly designed to overwhelm her with paperwork while creating documentation that could be used to support allegations of incompetence. Krueger's systematic approach included building relationships with contractors and civilian personnel who could provide additional perspectives on Elena's supposed deficiencies. He encouraged supply specialists to document any unusual equipment requests from Elena's squad, communications personnel to report on her radio procedures, and maintenance staff to note any non-standard weapon configurations her soldiers preferred. Cumulative effect of Krueger's campaign was to create an atmosphere where Elena's every action was scrutinized for evidence of the incompetence that existed only in his fabricated reports and manipulated documentation. The mission that would destroy Elena's life began with intelligence reports about a high-value target named Ahmed Nazir, a bomb maker responsible for coordinating attacks against coalition forces throughout Kandahar province. Nazir had been tracked to a compound in the remote village of Kala-i-Jangi, where he was reportedly meeting with other terrorist operatives to plan a major attack on coalition installations during the upcoming religious holiday. Major Krueger saw this mission as the perfect opportunity to eliminate Elena, while simultaneously advancing his career through a high-profile capture that would impress his superiors at higher headquarters. The target's importance would justify aggressive tactics, and the remote location would provide cover for whatever actions Krueger deemed necessary to resolve his Elena problem permanently. During the mission briefing, Krueger presented intelligence that Elena immediately recognized as incomplete and potentially inaccurate. The satellite imagery was 3 days old. The human intelligence sources were unverified, and the enemy strength estimates seemed deliberately understated. Elena's years of experience in special operations had taught her to recognize when intelligence packages were being manipulated to support predetermined operational concepts rather than inform tactical decision-making. "Sir, This intelligence requires additional verification before we commit forces, Elena said during the planning session. The imagery is outdated, we have no recent confirmation of target presence, and the estimated enemy strength doesn't align with previous operations in this area. Krueger's response was immediate and designed to undermine Elena's credibility while establishing the aggressive timeline he needed for his plan. Staff Sergeant Vasquez, your consistent resistance to operational directives has been noted. This target represents a time-sensitive opportunity that will be lost if we delay for unnecessary verification procedures. Colonel Hayes, who had been under increasing pressure from higher headquarters to demonstrate results, sided with Krueger's assessment despite Elena's proven track record of tactical judgment. The mission would proceed with a compressed timeline that prevented proper preparation and forced Elena's squad to rely on questionable intelligence. Elena spent the night before the mission reviewing maps and satellite imagery, trying to identify potential problems that could compromise her soldiers' safety. She discovered discrepancies in the intelligence that suggested the compound might be more heavily defended than reported, but Krueger dismissed her concerns as evidence of the excessive caution that supposedly prevented her from being an effective special operations leader. The insertion went wrong from the beginning. The helicopter landing zone was different from what had been briefed, forcing Elena's squad to navigate unfamiliar terrain in darkness while maintaining operational security. The compound's layout didn't match the satellite imagery, and Elena quickly realized that her team was walking into a situation that bore little resemblance to what they had been told to expect. When her squad reached the target building, Elena discovered that the structure was empty except for evidence of recent occupation. The intelligence had been wrong about Nazir's presence, but more troubling was the discovery of fresh defensive positions that suggested enemy forces were aware of the operation and had prepared an ambush. Elena immediately contacted base operations to report the compromised mission and request extraction. But Major Krueger's voice came over the radio with orders that revealed the true nature of his plan. Negative on extraction request. Expand search to adjacent buildings. Target is priority 1 and mission will continue until capture is achieved. Sir, we have evidence of enemy preparation and possible ambush. Immediate extraction is recommended to prevent casualties, Elena replied, her voice professional despite her growing understanding that Krueger was willing to sacrifice her squad to avoid the embarrassment of a failed mission. Krueger's response eliminated any doubt about his priorities. Staff Sergeant Vasquez, you will follow orders or face court-martial for disobedience in combat. Continue mission and capture the target. Elena realized that Krueger had deliberately sent her squad into a trap using false intelligence, then denied extraction when the mission was compromised. She faced the impossible choice between following orders that would likely result in casualties or disobeying direct commands in a combat zone. The decision was made for her when enemy forces opened fire from concealed positions surrounding the compound. Elena's squad was caught in a coordinated ambush that had clearly been planned in advance, with enemy fighters positioned to prevent escape routes and maximize casualties among coalition forces. During the firefight, Elena coordinated her squad's defensive actions while calling for immediate air support and medical evacuation. Her tactical leadership under fire demonstrated the competence that had made her exceptional throughout her career, but she was fighting against overwhelming odds with no support from the command structure that should have protected her soldiers. Explosion that separated Elena from her squad came from an improvised explosive device that had been positioned specifically to target the escape route she had identified during her tactical assessment. The blast knocked her unconscious and left her buried under debris while her squad, believing she had been killed, fought their way to the extraction point under cover and fire from arriving aircraft. When Elena regained consciousness hours later, she was alone in the destroyed building with serious injuries and no communication equipment. Her squad had been extracted believing she was dead, and enemy forces were systematically searching the area for survivors to capture or kill. Elena's survival over the following hours required every skill she had developed during her military career, but she knew that even if she survived, Krueger would ensure that her version of events never reached anyone who could hold him accountable for the betrayal that had nearly cost her life. The mission that was supposed to capture Ahmed Nasir had been a complete failure, but Krueger would spin it as a heroic action where Staff Sergeant Elena Vasquez had died serving her country, conveniently eliminating the witness to his criminal negligence while enhancing his reputation as a leader who took necessary risks to achieve important objectives. Elena Vasquez walked through the main entrance of Fort McKenzie on a cold Tuesday morning in October 2023, carrying a weathered duffel bag and a manila folder containing evidence that would expose the biggest military cover-up in decades. The security guard at the reception desk looked up from his computer screen and froze, his face draining of color as he recognized someone who had been declared killed in action 10 years earlier. Staff Sergeant Marcus Williams had been a young private when Elena deployed to Afghanistan, but he remembered her reputation throughout the base and had attended the memorial service held in her honor. Now, a decade later, he was staring at a ghost who looked older, scarred by years of survival in hostile territory, but unmistakably alive and carrying herself with the same quiet dignity that had defined her military service. "Ma'am, I should. This is impossible," William stammered, reaching for his phone while trying to process what he was seeing. Elena's appearance had the immediate effect of stopping normal base operations, as word spread through the facility with unprecedented speed. Within minutes, soldiers throughout Fort McKenzie were abandoning their duties to witness something that had never happened in military history. Officers left meetings, enlisted personnel stopped training exercises, and administrative staff poured out of their offices to see Elena Vasquez, who had been mourned as a hero and honored with posthumous commendations, standing in the headquarters lobby very much alive. Colonel Sarah Mitchell, the current base commander, arrived in the lobby within 10 minutes of the initial report, followed by a growing crowd of soldiers who couldn't believe what they were witnessing. Mitchell had served with Elena briefly before the Afghanistan deployment and had personally signed the condolence letters sent to Elena's family after her reported death. "Elena, how is this possible?" Mitchell asked, her voice carrying a mixture of shock and growing anger as she began to understand the implications of Elena's survival. "We held a memorial service. Your family received death benefits. You've been listed as killed in action for 10 years. Elena's response was delivered with the same professional calm that had characterized her throughout her military career, but her words carried the weight of a decade spent gathering evidence and preparing for this moment. "Colonel, Major William Krueger deliberately sent my squad into an ambush using false intelligence, then denied extraction when the mission was compromised. I survived the attack and have spent 10 years documenting the conspiracy that declared me dead to cover up his criminal negligence." The manila folder Elena carried contained evidence that would destroy multiple careers and expose systematic corruption within the special operations community. She had photographs, recorded conversations, financial documents, and testimony from Afghan sources who had witnessed the events that Krueger had misrepresented in his official reports. Elena's survival story began to emerge as base personnel gathered around her, creating an unprecedented scene where normal military protocol was suspended in favor of bearing witness to a moment that would reshape how the military handled accountability and corruption. She had been captured by local fighters who initially planned to sell her to terrorist organizations, but had been rescued by an Afghan family who risked their lives to protect an American soldier, Rahul Ahmad, the village elder who had sheltered. Elena had recently contacted American authorities through refugee resettlement programs, providing information about her survival and offering to testify about the circumstances that had led to her presumed death. His testimony corroborated Elena's evidence about Krueger's manipulation of intelligence and his refusal to authorize extraction when the mission was compromised. Elena's years in hiding had been spent not just surviving, but carefully documenting the truth about what had happened during her final mission. She had maintained contact with Afghan sources who provided information about Krueger's continued operations, his relationships with defense contractors, and his systematic elimination of other soldiers who had questioned his methods. The evidence Elena presented included recordings of conversations between Krueger and contractor representatives discussing how to manipulate mission reports to justify increased private military involvement in Afghanistan operations. She had financial records showing payments to Krueger from companies that had benefited from his operational decisions, and correspondence proving that her squad had been deliberately sent into known enemy territory using fabricated intelligence. As word of Elena's return spread beyond Fort McKenzie, something unprecedented began happening throughout the military community. Veterans who had served under Krueger's command began contacting base headquarters, offering testimony about incidents they had witnessed but been afraid to report. Social media platforms exploded with messages from soldiers sharing their own experiences with corruption and cover-ups that had been ignored by higher authorities. Master Sergeant David Rodriguez, who had served with Elena in Afghanistan and had questioned the official account of her death, drove 8 hours from his current duty station to Fort McKenzie when he heard about her return. "I knew something was wrong about that mission report," he told reporters who had gathered outside the base. "Elena was too competent to die the way they said she did." Captain Jennifer Walsh, now a major serving at the Pentagon, submitted a formal request to testify before any investigation into Krueger's actions. She had maintained contact with Elena's mother throughout the years following the reported death and had privately questioned inconsistencies in the official reports. The unprecedented response to Elena's return included active duty soldiers, veterans, and military families who had been affected by similar incidents of corruption and cover-ups. Within 48 hours of her appearance at Fort McKenzie, military justice advocates had established a hotline for reporting related incidents, and congressional representatives were demanding immediate investigations into special operations oversight. Procedures. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. Elena's quiet dignity during this extraordinary moment demonstrated the same character that had made her exceptional throughout her military career. She answered questions professionally, provided evidence methodically, and maintained her focus on ensuring that the truth was finally revealed, regardless of the personal cost to herself or others involved in the conspiracy that had stolen 10 years of her life. The investigation that Elena's return triggered moved with unprecedented speed as military investigators, FBI agents, and congressional oversight committees converged on Fort McKenzie to examine evidence that would ultimately expose a conspiracy reaching far beyond one corrupt officer's personal ambitions. Within 72 hours of Elena's appearance, investigators had established a secure facility where her decade of carefully gathered documentation could be analyzed by experts who understood the full implications of what she had discovered. FBI Special Agent Rebecca Torres, who specialized in military corruption cases, spent 18 hours reviewing Elena's evidence before calling her supervisor with a preliminary assessment that would launch the largest military justice investigation in decades. We're looking at systematic fraud, conspiracy to commit murder, falsification of official records, and contractor kickbacks that total millions of dollars, Torres reported. This isn't just about one bad officer. It's about a network of corruption that compromised multiple operations and cost American lives. Elena's Manila folder contained audio recordings that she had secretly made during her captivity, including conversations with Afghan sources who had witnessed Krueger's meetings with contractor representatives in the months leading up to her supposed death. These recordings provided direct evidence that Krueger had been receiving payments in exchange for recommending expanded use of private military services, creating a financial incentive for him to pursue aggressive operations, regardless of soldier safety. The financial documents Elena had gathered painted a picture of systematic corruption that extended far beyond her individual case. Bank records showed deposits to offshore accounts controlled by Krueger that corresponded precisely with contracts awarded to companies that had advocated for the operational changes he had implemented at Fort Phoenix. Invoices and payment authorizations revealed that contractor representatives had been billing the military for services that were never provided, with Krueger's approval enabling fraud that cost taxpayers millions of dollars. Dr. Sarah Chun, a digital forensics expert from the Army Criminal Investigation Command, discovered that official mission reports from Fort Phoenix had been systematically altered after Elena's presumed death. The original files contained Elena's accurate assessments of intelligence quality and her warnings about operational risks, but the versions that reached higher headquarters had been modified to support Krueger's narrative of successful aggressive tactics and eliminated obstacles to mission effectiveness. The metadata tells the whole story, Dr. Chun explained to investigators. Every report that mentioned Staff Sergeant Vasquez was edited multiple times, with specific deletions of her tactical assessments and safety recommendations. Someone spent considerable effort rewriting history to eliminate evidence of her competence and Krueger's negligence. Lieutenant Colonel James Patterson, who had served as intelligence officer at Fort Phoenix during Elena's deployment, was granted immunity in exchange for testimony that provided crucial corroboration of Elena's claims. Patterson revealed that Krueger had pressured intelligence analysts to modify their assessments to support predetermined operational conclusions, threatening their careers if they refused to provide the information he wanted. Major Krueger told U.S. explicitly that intelligence reports needed to support aggressive tactics, Patterson testified. When analysts provided assessments that recommended caution or additional verification, he would send the reports back with instructions to find ways to justify immediate action. We knew the intelligence was being manipulated, but Krueger had direct communication with Colonel Hayes and threatened anyone who questioned his methods. The investigation uncovered evidence that Elena's mission had been deliberately compromised. Through information passed to enemy forces by Afghan sources who were working with contractor representatives, text messages recovered from seized phones showed that Krueger had provided advance warning about coalition operations to local contacts, who were supposed to be providing security support, but were actually working with terrorist organizations. Major General Patricia Stone, who had been appointed to oversee the investigation, discovered that Krueger's corruption had resulted in at least 12 American deaths during operations that had been compromised by his agreements with contractors and enemy collaborators. Elena's case was not an isolated incident, but part of a pattern of betrayal that had continued for years after her presumed death. Congressional investigators found that Krueger had been promoted twice following Elena's reported death, with his personnel file containing glowing evaluations that praised his aggressive leadership and innovative tactical approaches. The officers who had written these evaluations admitted under oath that they had never conducted independent verification of Krueger's claims about operational success rates or his methods for achieving improved results. Defense contractor executives who had worked with Krueger were arrested on charges of fraud, conspiracy, and providing material support to enemy forces. Their cooperation with investigators revealed the full scope of a network that had systematically corrupted special operations units throughout Afghanistan in pursuit of profits that depended on expanded private military involvement. Elena's Afghan protector Rahul Ahmad provided testimony through secure video link that confirmed every detail of her account about the ambush and subsequent survival. Ahmad had maintained detailed records of his interactions with American forces, including photographs and documents that proved Elena's presence in his village and his efforts to arrange her safe return to coalition control. Medical examinations confirmed that Elena's injuries were consistent with the explosive device she described, and forensic analysis of her equipment proved that she had been present at the compound during the firefight that supposedly killed her. DNA evidence recovered from the blast site matched samples taken during Elena's return, providing scientific proof that corroborated her survival story. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable, and damning. Krueger's carefully constructed lies unraveled under scrutiny from investigators who understood how to trace digital records, follow financial transactions, and verify testimonial evidence through independent sources. Within 1 week of Elena's return, Major William Krueger was arrested at his current assignment in Germany and charged with conspiracy, fraud, dereliction of duty, and accessory to murder. The court-martial of Major William Krueger began 8 weeks after Elena's return to Fort McKenzie, held in a secure courtroom at Fort Leavenworth, where military justice would be served under the full scrutiny of national media and congressional oversight. The proceedings attracted unprecedented attention as the first case where a soldier presumed killed in action had returned to testify against the officer responsible for her betrayal. Krueger entered the courtroom, wearing his dress uniform stripped of decorations, his once commanding presence reduced to that of a man whose carefully constructed facade had been demolished by the weight of irrefutable evidence. The defense strategy attempted to portray him as a dedicated officer who had made difficult decisions under combat pressure, but the prosecution's case systematically destroyed any claim to honorable service. Colonel Michael Rodriguez, serving as military judge, presided over proceedings that would establish precedents for handling military corruption cases involving contractor fraud and deliberate endangerment of American forces. The evidence presented during the trial painted a comprehensive picture of systematic betrayal that had cost American lives and compromised national security for personal financial gain. Elena's testimony was delivered with the same professional composure that had defined her military service, but her words carried the emotional weight of 10 years stolen from her life and family. She described Krueger's manipulation of intelligence, his refusal to authorize extraction when her mission was compromised, and the evidence she had gathered during her years in hiding that proved his criminal conspiracy with defense contractors and enemy collaborators. Major Krueger knowingly sent my squad into an ambush using fabricated intelligence. Elena testified, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was revealing. When I requested extraction after discovering the compromised situation, he refused and threatened me with court-martial for disobedience. His actions were designed to eliminate me as a witness to his corruption, while advancing his career through false operational statistics. The prosecution presented financial records showing that Krueger had received over $2.3 million in payments from defense contractors, who had benefited from his operational recommendations. Bank statements revealed deposits to offshore accounts that corresponded exactly with contracts awarded to companies that had advocated for the aggressive tactics Krueger had implemented at FOB Phoenix. Lieutenant Colonel Patterson's testimony provided crucial insider perspective on how Krueger had systematically corrupted intelligence processes to support predetermined operational conclusions. Patterson described meetings where Krueger had explicitly ordered analysts to modify their assessments regardless of ground truth, threatening careers and promotions for anyone who refused to comply with his demands. Dr. Cheen's digital forensics analysis demonstrated conclusively that official mission reports had been altered after Elena's presumed death to eliminate evidence of Krueger's negligence and create false documentation supporting his claims of tactical innovation. The technical evidence was so comprehensive that Krueger's defense team abandoned attempts to challenge the authenticity of the modified records. The most damaging testimony came from Sergeant First Class Robert Chun, who had served under Krueger's command for 18 months following Elena's mission. Chun described witnessing Krueger provide operational information to Afghan contacts who were later identified as enemy collaborators, directly resulting in ambushes that killed 12 American soldiers and wounded 37 others. Major Krueger told us that sharing operational details with local contacts was necessary for building trust, Chun testified. We later discovered that those same contacts were passing information to insurgent groups, who used it to plan attacks against our forces. When soldiers questioned these practices, Krueger accused them of lacking the aggressive mindset required for special operations. Defense contractor executives who had worked with Krueger provided testimony under plea agreements that revealed the full scope of the conspiracy. Their companies had paid Krueger to recommend expanded private military involvement in Afghanistan operations, creating artificial demand for services that generated hundreds of millions in government contracts while compromising operational security. Elena's Afghan protector, Rahul Ahmad, testified via secure video link about his decision to shelter an American soldier despite enormous personal risk to his family and community. Ahmad's testimony provided moral authority that contrasted sharply with Krueger's betrayal of the soldiers he was supposed to protect. In my culture, we believe that protecting someone who has served with honor is a sacred duty, Ahmad told the court through an interpreter. Elena Vasquez fought to protect innocent people from terrorists. When she needed protection, we gave it gladly, even though helping Americans put our families in danger. The military panel deliberated for 6 hours before returning a verdict of guilty on all charges, including conspiracy, fraud, dereliction of duty, accessory to murder, and providing aid to enemy forces. Krueger's conviction carried a sentence of life imprisonment without possibility of parole, forfeiture of all pay and allowances, and dismissal from military service. Colonel Hayes, who had enabled Krueger's corruption through willful blindness to obvious warning signs, was court-martialed separately and received a sentence of 20 years imprisonment along with dismissal from service. His failure to protect subordinates from a clearly corrupt superior officer demonstrated criminal negligence that contributed directly to American casualties. Elena's vindication was complete and public. The military formally apologized for the decade of injustice she had endured, restored her to active duty with promotion to Sergeant Major, and awarded her the Distinguished Service Cross for her courage in exposing systematic corruption that had compromised national security. The ceremony where Elena received her decoration was attended by soldiers from throughout her career, including many who had traveled across the country to witness her recognition. Master Sergeant Rodriguez, now retired, presented Elena with a flag that had been flown over every base where soldiers had served who remembered her integrity and competence. Secretary of Defense Patricia Williams personally presented Elena with new military identification tags to replace those she had carried for 10 years, symbolically restoring her official existence, while acknowledging the military's failure to protect one of its finest soldiers from corruption within its own ranks. The reforms that emerged from Elena Vasquez's case transformed military culture in ways that extended far beyond individual accountability, creating systematic changes designed to prevent future incidents of corruption while protecting soldiers who demonstrated the moral courage to report misconduct. The Vasquez Protocols, as they became known throughout the Department of Defense, established comprehensive procedures for investigating allegations of command misconduct and provided robust protections for whistleblowers who risked their careers. To expose wrongdoing, Congress passed the Military Integrity Protection Act within 6 months of Krueger's conviction, creating independent oversight mechanisms that removed corruption. Investigations from traditional command structures were personal. Relationships and career considerations had previously influenced outcomes. The legislation established civilian-led review boards with authority to investigate senior officers and mandated automatic referral to federal prosecutors for cases involving contractor fraud or deliberate endangerment of American forces. Elena's role in implementing these reforms reflected her continued commitment to protecting soldiers while serving the institution that had ultimately vindicated her sacrifice. As the newly appointed Director of Military Ethics and Accountability, she traveled to installations worldwide, training officers in recognizing and reporting corruption while building systems that encouraged integrity over institutional convenience. Her presentations to officer development courses became legendary throughout the military for their practical approach to ethical leadership under pressure. Elena shared her experiences not as a victim seeking sympathy, but as a professional who understood that individual integrity was the foundation upon which military effectiveness depended. Young officers left her sessions with clear understanding that excellence was not just valued, but actively protected by leaders who prioritized mission success over personal advancement. The Elena Vasquez Foundation, established with proceeds from her book about survival and military ethics, provided support for military families affected by command misconduct, while funding research into organizational factors that enabled corruption within military institutions. The Foundation's scholarship program supported children of soldiers who had been killed or injured due to command negligence, ensuring that their sacrifice was remembered through opportunities for education and advancement. Elena's influence extended beyond American military institutions as international allies adopted similar protocols for protecting integrity within their own armed forces. NATO established joint training programs based on lessons learned from her case, and military academies worldwide incorporated her experiences into curriculum designed to prepare future officers for the ethical challenges they would face throughout their careers. The ripple effects of Elena's courage could be measured in concrete changes that saved lives and protected soldiers from the kind of systematic betrayal she had endured. Special operations units implemented new intelligence verification procedures that prevented commanders from manipulating information to support predetermined conclusions. Contractor oversight programs established clear boundaries between military decision-making and private sector influence, eliminating the financial incentives that had corrupted Krueger's judgment. 3 years after her return, Elena received a letter from Captain Maria Santos, a young officer who had reported her commanding officer for falsifying training records and endangering soldiers through inadequate preparation. Santos had faced retaliation and career threats, but had maintained her position because Elena's example demonstrated that integrity was ultimately protected by institutions willing to defend their own values. "Your story gave me the courage to do what I knew was right," Santos wrote. "When my commander threatened my career for reporting his misconduct, I remembered that you survived 10 years of injustice and ultimately prevailed because you never compromised your principles. The investigation you inspired created the protection I needed to expose corruption without destroying my ability to serve." Elena's continued military service demonstrated that excellence could thrive when protected by systems designed to reward competence rather than punish it. Her current assignment as senior advisor to the Joint Chiefs of Staff on ethical leadership placed her at the center of policy development that would shape military culture for decades to come. The memorial garden at Fort McKenzie, where Elena's name had been inscribed among fallen soldiers, was transformed into a living monument celebrating integrity and moral courage. Her name remained on the memorial, but with new inscription recognizing her as a soldier who had served with such distinction that even death could not diminish her influence on those who followed her example. Elena's story became required reading at military academies and leadership development programs, not as an inspiring tale of individual heroism, but as a practical demonstration that institutions were only as strong as the character of those who served within them. Her experiences provided concrete evidence that integrity was not just an abstract ideal, but a operational necessity that directly impacted mission effectiveness and soldier safety. The broader cultural impact of Elena's case extended beyond military institutions to civilian organizations where employees faced similar pressure to compromise their principles for institutional convenience. Corporate ethics programs adopted elements of the Vasquez protocols, and professional associations established protections for members who reported misconduct despite personal risk to their careers. Elena's speaking engagements at universities, corporate conferences, and community organizations always concluded with the same message that had sustained her through 10 years of survival and vindication. Integrity is not about being perfect, she would tell audiences. It's about making choices that you can defend regardless of the personal cost. When you choose character over convenience, you're not just protecting yourself. You're protecting everyone who depends on institutions that work the way they're supposed to work. As Elena continued her service, now as a colonel and one of the most respected voices on military ethics, her legacy was measured not in the corruption she had exposed or the justice she had achieved, but in the countless soldiers who served with greater confidence, knowing that excellence was protected and integrity was valued above all other considerations. The ocean of Afghanistan, where her story began, had given way to a different kind of horizon, one where moral courage was recognized as the foundation of institutional strength, and where soldiers like Elena Vasquez ensured that truth would always prevail over convenience, character over corruption, and honor over everything else. 5 years after her return from the dead, Colonel Elena Vasquez stood before the graduating class of the United States Military Academy at West Point, delivering the commencement address to 1,200 newly commissioned officers who would carry her lessons of integrity into conflicts yet to be fought. The invitation to speak at West Point represented the highest honor the Army could bestow on an officer whose character had literally reshaped military culture through personal sacrifice and unwavering commitment to principles that transcended individual ambition. Elena's speech that day focused not on her survival story or the corruption she had exposed, but on the practical responsibilities that came with wearing the uniform of the United States Army. She spoke about leadership as a sacred trust between officers and the soldiers whose lives would depend on their competence, integrity, and moral courage when facing decisions that would define their character forever. Each of you will face moments when doing the right thing costs more than you want to pay, Elena told the cadets, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had paid that price and discovered that integrity was worth any sacrifice. In those moments, remember that your soldiers are watching. Your institution is depending on you, and history will judge whether you chose character or convenience. The standing ovation that followed Elena's speech lasted for 7 minutes, but more meaningful were the letters she received from cadets over the following months, describing how her words had influenced their approach to leadership challenges they encountered during their first assignments. Lieutenant Michael Torres wrote from his posting in Germany about refusing pressure from his company commander to falsify training records, crediting Elena's example with giving him the courage to maintain standards despite personal risk. Elena's current assignment as director of the Defense Ethics Institute placed her at the center of ongoing efforts to institutionalize the cultural changes that her case had inspired throughout the military. The institute, established with congressional funding following her vindication, conducted research into organizational factors that enabled or prevented ethical failures, while developing training programs that prepared leaders to recognize and respond to corruption before it compromised mission effectiveness. The Institute's most significant achievement was the development of early warning systems that identified patterns of behavior associated with command misconduct before they resulted in casualties or compromised operations. These systems analyze data from multiple sources including personnel reports, financial records, operational statistics, and anonymous feedback from subordinates, to create comprehensive profiles of leadership effectiveness that prevented dangerous officers from advancing to positions where they could harm soldiers or missions. Elena's personal life had been transformed by her return to the world she had lost a decade earlier, but the adjustment required constant navigation between the person she had been and the person her experiences had created. Her relationship with her mother, who had spent 10 years grieving the daughter she believed was dead, required careful rebuilding of trust and communication that had been severed by circumstances beyond either woman's control. Her younger brother Carlos, now a successful engineer in California, had struggled with survivor's guilt during Elena's presumed death and required professional counseling to process his sister's miraculous return. Their relationship had been complicated by his decision to name his daughter Elena in honor of his supposedly deceased sister, creating awkward family dynamics that required patience and understanding from everyone involved. Elena's romantic life remained challenging due to the unique circumstances of her experience and the public attention that continued to surround her story. Her relationship with Dr. James Patterson, a military psychologist who specialized in trauma recovery, had developed slowly over 2 years as both navigated the complexities of building intimacy while dealing with the psychological aftermath of her survival and vindication. The international impact of Elena's story continued to influence military institutions worldwide as foreign officers attended training programs at the Defense Ethics Institute and returned to their home countries with new understanding of how integrity could be systematically protected and rewarded. The British Army adopted modified versions of the Vasquez protocols, and the German Bundeswehr established similar oversight mechanisms following corruption scandals that had compromised their operations in Afghanistan. Elena's most challenging assignment came when she was selected to investigate allegations of systematic corruption within a Marine Corps unit stationed in the Pacific, where officers had been accused of manipulating intelligence to justify unnecessary operations that resulted in civilian casualties. Her investigation revealed patterns similar to those she had experienced with Krueger, but the institutional changes inspired by her case provided tools and protections that enabled swift resolution without requiring personal sacrifice from whistleblowers. Investigation demonstrated the effectiveness of reforms that had emerged from Elena's experience, as multiple officers came forward with evidence of misconduct without fear of retaliation. The corrupt commanders were removed and prosecuted, while the soldiers who reported their misconduct received protection and recognition rather than punishment and exile. Elena's memoir, 10 Years Dead, A Soldier's Return to Honor, became required reading at military institutions worldwide and topped bestseller lists for 6 months following its publication. The book's success provided financial security that allowed Elena to establish educational programs for military children while funding research into ethical leadership that would benefit future generations of soldiers. Her speaking engagements at civilian universities, corporate conferences, and community organizations always emphasized that integrity was not exclusively a military virtue, but a foundation for any institution that served purposes larger than individual advancement. Elena's message resonated with audiences who recognized that the principles she embodied were essential for maintaining trust in democratic institutions, corporate governance, and professional relationships that required moral courage to function effectively. As Elena continued her service, her legacy was visible in the thousands of soldiers who had been trained in ethical leadership programs she had developed, the institutional reforms that protected integrity throughout the military, and the cultural transformation that had made moral courage a valued characteristic rather than a career liability. Today, Colonel Elena Vasquez serves as the most trusted voice on military ethics in the Pentagon, but her true legacy lives in the countless soldiers who serve with confidence, knowing that integrity is protected rather than punished. The empty grave that once bore her name at Arlington National Cemetery now houses a memorial garden where military families gather to honor all those who chose character over convenience, courage over comfort. Elena's story reaches far beyond military circles. Her principles have inspired teachers who report administrative corruption, nurses who expose patient safety violations, and corporate employees who refuse to participate in fraud despite personal cost. The Vasquez protocols have been adapted by organizations worldwide, proving that institutional integrity depends on protecting those who have the courage to speak truth to power. On quiet evenings, Elena still walks the grounds of Fort McKenzie, where her journey back from the dead began. She often encounters young soldiers seeking advice about ethical dilemmas they face, and her response is always the same. Your integrity is the only thing that truly belongs to you. Everything else can be taken away, but your character remains. Yours to protect or surrender. Elena's remarkable survival wasn't just about escaping death in Afghanistan. It was about surviving a system designed to silence truth, enduring a decade of injustice, and returning to transform the institution that had betrayed her into one that protects those who serve with honor. Her story proves that excellence cannot be suppressed forever, that truth has a way of surfacing despite powerful forces trying to bury it, and that one person's courage to do what's right can change entire institutions. If Elena's incredible journey inspired you, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more stories of ordinary people who did extraordinary things when it mattered most. What would you have done in Elena's situation? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one and love hearing from our amazing community around the world.